Shields up, Ironbreakers. Cowboy coming at you, and today we're going to be talking about the Gunlance. Now, I have played Gunlance for a while. I played it through World, played it through Rise, but I primarily used normal Gunlance, and Wilds was the first time I really embraced the Gunlance in all three of its forms, normal, long, and wide. Big shout out, obviously, to my boy Rurikhan. Without him, I don't think I would have fully committed to the House of Boom as I did here, making it my secondary weapon for my initial playthrough. But either way, today we're going to be breaking down the Gunlance. We're going to be doing this the same way we did with the Insect Glaives. We're going to be going over some of the basics, mainly going to be looking at the combos that we're primarily using in combat. If you want a very basic guide, of course, that will be linked in the description, the starter guide for people who have never touched the weapon before, going through weapons, going through armors, and doing a hunt. So with that being said, let's jump in. Obvious high rank spoilers here. We're going to be talking about everything involving Gunlance, which, you know, you're clicking a guide, you should be expecting it. Either way, let's go. And the first thing I want to talk about, of course, is going to the play guide and talking about weapon controls. If you've never touched the weapon, this covers all the basics of the weapon, the basic moves, common combos. But the one thing I want to call attention to is the shelling type, because there are 3 shelling types for Gunlance, and this is really going to dictate how you're playing with the weapon. Normals have the most capacity, making them very good for full bursting, as well as the Wormstake Blast. Long shells have more powerful Wormstake attacks, so it's going to be great to snipe weak spots with them, as well as just work that into your combo, doing the Wormstake Full Blast. And then, of course, wide shelling is going to be great for charging our shells and dumping out Wyvern Fires. And these 3 playstyles all play fairly different, so it really depends on kind of what you're vibing with more, but all 3 of them are viable, so really you're just going to go with whatever you want. Now, just to further break things down, in terms of using a wide Gunlance, as I mentioned, one of the main things I'm going to be doing is going for charge shelling. I'm going to be doing charge shelling, and then I'm also going to be taking a big focus around dumping out my Wyvern Fire, because the Wyvern Fires in particular hit very hard with wide shelling, and it's actually pretty easy to get those back up. So putting on a wound on the monster. One of the first tips is when you're trying to use your Wyvern Fire, you want to use it back to back. Using one Wyvern Fire followed by a second, the second will be faster. And if you do the first out of a wound, it will come out significantly faster than if you had just free casted it. So we do a wound, Wyvern Fire, second Wyvern Fire. And that's going to be how we really pump our damage. Now, to maximize your returns on that, you're going to want to be really close to the monster when this starts, because you are getting blown back quite a bit, or you're going to want to have your back up against a wall or something. If you're just letting it rip, you're going to be missing ticks on that Wyvern Fire. The reason this is so nice with the wide Gunlance is check out how much gauge I get back. Look at that. 1 burst. It's my second charge shelling burst. And the third. With just 3 charge shelling bursts, I've almost completely filled up my Wyvern Fire gauges. Now, given that's not how most fights are going to go, but the point being that with wide, you're filling those gauges incredibly quickly, which is going to allow you to just pump out that Wyvern Fire and really pump out the damage. Now, if there is not a wound on the monster, one of the other ways that is very good to execute that quick Wyvern Fire is going to be via a perfect guard. Getting a perfect guard, we can do a couple things, but going for the overhead into the burst, while that is a great damage option, that's going to be something that's more for normal. But if you don't have anything else to do, going straight into the quick Wyvern Fire is going to be a go-to decision. Now, just to show a normal Wyvern Fire instead of after the second, if I was to take some actual time and wait to just do a Wyvern Fire, you can see it's about a second longer, which is not the end of the world, but you should try and always execute that out of a weak spot or out of a perfect guard. Additionally, our full reload now has a guard point on it, as you can see right there. And to better demonstrate this, what I want you to look at is the point where the shield kind of wiggles around. You can see how I'm pulling it in a little circle. I just want to block during that little wiggle window to get my perfect guard. And when I'm doing this, you can actually see where the shield flashes, the guard point. It's very much at the startup of the animation, so this is very much reactionary. Think of it like a parry in something like Souls. So as soon as it's coming down, that's when I want to hit it. If I try and do it too early, I'm not going to hit that perfect guard. But that's a great way to reload your weapon in addition to, just getting off a free block at the same time. Because getting off those guards is just going to lead to getting a clash, which then leads to a bigger follow-up. But so if I'm playing wide, my main concern is going to be getting charge shelling. So I'm going to be, using my shells to move. I'm going to be looking for a spot where I can get and then start pumping out the shells. If I'm still right on top of the target, I may just go directly into another one. Now, there are two ways to really get back on the target here. Either you're going to go beforehand with a lunging up thrust, and then you're going to go into your charge, or alternatively, out of the charge, you would do a wide sweep, and then reload, and then go for the charge. And in terms of which you go for, it really just depends on the situation. You know, if I need to get the reload off faster so I can block, I'm not going to go for the moving wide sweep. But it's really just going to come down to kind of how things are in the fight. But that is primarily how we're going to be utilizing things for our movement. In terms of just general forward movement, we go lunging into shelling into moving wide sweep. And we can do this in a variety of different directions. Let's see, we're able to go that way. Instead, if I just, you know, and I'm like, oh, I got to get over here. You can see just how much sideways mobility we're getting. Even just hitting the, even just hitting a shell in a moving wide sweep alone. That alone is covering a ton of distance. And whereas in the past, Evade Extender was basically an auto-include for Gunlance, I only have 1 point of it now. And that feels more than enough, to be honest. I feel like we have a lot of lateral movement now with the weapon. Now, while wide is my preferred style of gunlancing, let's certainly not forget about the other two, long and normal. Now, when it comes to long, you might think like, oh, my worm stake cannons are stronger, so, you know, I should be prioritizing my worm stake combo. You know, I'm going to go into the wide sweep, and then boom, I'm going to put out my worm stake cannon, I'm going to get damage of it. And while your worm stake cannon is going to be stronger with long, the bigger thing is going to be the weak points, because keep in mind that using Drake Auger also implements that worm stake cannon. So getting out that Drake Auger as much as possible, looking to snipe those weak spots, that's going to be where long really begins to shine. Now, we also have the new move, the Worm Stake Full Blast. This is also a very good option for getting in damage with long. We're going to shell into a moving wide sweep, hit both buttons, and then do it again. With that particular move getting in two separate worm stakes, it's just going to pump out a lot of damage. And there's a lot of different ways we can go into this. You know, we could go for a do that, and then boom, and then we're going to go into it. You can see we actually have a lot of time before we need to execute that second part of the worm stake blast. So you could even just execute the first part and then chill for a second and go into a guard. You don't need to fully commit to it. But generally, if I'm going for the worm stake full blast, it's usually because the monster's down and I have a big opening. But with long, you're going to be spending a lot of time sniping those weak points. You really want to take advantage of those weak points and smash them whenever you can, because you're doing really good damage to those with your worm stake out of Drake Auger. Now, normal is the bread and butter gunlance for me that I played for ages. Lunging up thrust, overhead smash, burst fire, wide sweep, quick reload, overhead smash, burst fire. And this is just a very, very fun style of gunlancing. Obviously, the worm stake full blast is also very good here. In terms of damage, it's pretty comparable to long. It really just depends on a couple things, you know, whether you're going to get a crit or not. But the actual damage of worm stake full blast is very close for long and normal. Usually normal is going to pull ahead because of the amount of shelling strength and how many shells it's putting out into the target, compared to long, where a majority of your damage is from the worm stake. But both of those are viable ways to attack. And if you do have a longer window, the multi worm stake full blast is going to be a better go-to than just sitting there and just full bursting. Full bursting is obviously very good. I'm not saying it's not. Full burst is just going to pump damage. But if you have the opportunity, go for the bigger blast. Now, I mentioned this earlier, but especially with normal lancing or normal gun lancing, out of perfect guards, boom, boom. You can really just kind of punish with this, you know. If a monster is just, you know, you're getting those perfect guards. I mean, every time you get a perfect guard, there's no reason not just be like, oh, thank you. Overhead smash, burst fire, and just really pump that damage. But yeah, all three forms of Gunlance are really good. In terms of overall play with the weapon and what I would recommend, it really does come down to preference. I think normal and long certainly tap into more of the weapon, but I don't know, something about wide, something about getting those fast wyvern fires, I just find that I really prefer that. I just really like the big booms. So making our way over to town, let's talk about the Gunlance choices. Now, when it comes to gun lancing, there is a new stat that is quite important, and that is the power stat you see there under shelling type. It says slightly strong, but this is actually a 20% boost in the potency of things like your shells and your wyvern fire. It's a very, very strong upgrade. So with that in mind, going for that over something like slightly weak, You know, in this particular case, I'd be counting on Uthduna to make up that difference with just its slapping capability and the elemental damage it's doing. Whereas if you're going to be prioritizing shelling, Slightly Strong is clear and far going to be the way to go. Now, in terms of early Gunlances, the Chemitrice is going to be the absolute GOAT early on. This thing comes in at 140 true raw. It's going to have 2 points of guard on it, normal, Slightly Strong. Very, very solid choice, and this will carry you through the majority of the game. Now, in terms of long Gunlances, there's not all that much early. We do have the triple bayonet. That's not going to have the power boost that we had before. And then when it comes to wide Slightly Strong, we have the Alberth Rook. This is going to be one of our earliest Slightly Strong wide gun lances, but it's not one that we're going to stick with for too long. Gunlancing is really going to pop off when we get into high rank. There, we're going to gain access to both Gravios with White Gunlance 1, as well as Jasoparos with the Hard Hitter 1, and then the Hard Hitter 2. And these are going to be pretty solid. I'm a bigger fan of the White Gunlance. Jasoparos obviously has the better sharpness on it, but between the long Slightly Strongs, in general, Gravios is going to pull ahead. Getting towards the end of low rank and making our way into high rank, we also gain access to Guardian Arkfeld, which will eventually become our best in slot wide Gunlance. This thing coming in, we're getting up to 210 at rarity 6 and then up to a whopping 240 at rarity 8 is the absolute GOAT of wide lancing. And that's really going to be your three, your big three. Once you get to endgame, the G Lawful Boars coming from Guardian Arkfeld, the White Cannon coming from Gravios up at 240 with 400 blast. And then, of course, it was good at the start, and it's still good at the end. The Fire Trail Chemidor at 230, 250, and that blue sharpness. Now, I do want to give honorable mention to Jindahad because I absolutely love the visuals of this Gunlance, and it is quite strong. Comparing it up against the Guardian Arkfeld, you can see that it's going to have double the element of it. They're both wide and Slightly Strong. It has an extra point of guard. It has white sharpness, and it has a 3-2-1 compared to the 3-3-1 on Lawful Boars. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, that white sharpness and 500 element isn't going to be enough to offset the shelling advantage we get with Lawful Boars with 30 extra raw attack on the Gunlance. And for those that don't know, whereas most weapons, everything that's going to help your attack is going to help your weapon. Everything that helps your attack is going to help the slaps of the Gunlance. The actual shelling damage of the shells themselves, that's going to come from a skill known as Artillery, which is a weapon decoration, and the new stat, which we have, the Power stat, Slightly Strong. Those are the only things they're going to be able to boost that up for us outside of some more unique things like food buffs and whatnot. But so when it comes to Gunlance, and if you're playing Gunlance, you're probably playing it because you want the boom. You're going to want to have Slightly Strong power, and you're going to want to have as much raw attack on that Gunlance as possible. Now, to be honest, I have not tried Elemental Lancing that much. And if you were to do Elemental Lancing, I would suggest something like either trying out the Falamarda of the Waves or Jindahad's, these coming in with 400 water and 500 ice respectively. When it comes to Ardean weapons on Gunlance, they're kind of in a weird spot. Let me explain. So if I was to take, fire, fire, and then fire, I'm getting 350 fire. So Ardean is certainly going to probably be the option for a majority of elemental Gunlances, but this is normal, right? And let's say, oh, you know what? I think I actually want a water Gunlance. Oh, well, now it's long. Like, oh, okay. Well, what about if I want a ice Gunlance? Okay, now we're back to normal. Well, but I'm a fan of wide lancing. How do I get to do wide lancing? No, dragon's going to be long. What about if I go to poison? Oh, look at that. It's suddenly wide. And so it's a little all over the place because you're not getting to really choose your shelling type with Ardean. It's just going to depend. I mean, you are getting to choose, but it just depends on the elemental combos you're using. And then on top of that, the power does not change. Unless there's like an extremely low chance. I've upgraded 2 separate Ardean Gunlances. I never saw the power, Slightly Strong or Slightly Weak pop up at all. So to my knowledge, they're all just locked to normal. And as I mentioned, that is a 20% difference in the potency of things like our shells and our Wyvern Fire. And at the end of the day, I mean, even if I was to take a pure attack infused at 205, and then I was to get full attack reinforcements, that's only going to put this at 230 with white sharpness. And even then, I mean, that's still below what we get with the Gravios and the Lawful Boars. So it's like, I don't see it, man. I don't see Ardean being competitive here. Maybe for Elemental Lancing if you're doing a lot of slapping, but that would be the only instance where I think it might potentially pull ahead. And to be honest, nobody's using Gunlance for elements. We're out here pumping big booms. Moving on from there to the armor. So a majority of the things we typically look for in Gunlance, things like guard, guard up, evade extender. Well, evade extender is an armor skill, but guard, guard up, artillery, magazine up, all that is going to be weapon skills. So with that in mind, early on, I'd consider Balahara. You could get a 3-piece evade extender with this, which is pretty nice. But outside of that, there's not a whole lot going on in the armor category when it comes to Gunlance. And this is also going to be the case as we get into high rank. When it comes to high rank, I went for my bread and butter set. I use this with a lot of weapons, but going for Guardian Arkfeld Beta on the 4-piece. And then lastly, I like to work in a new Udra Greaves beta, and this actually gives me a pretty comfy set. We're going to come in with Burst 5, Flayer 5, Divine Blessing, Recovery up, a little bit of Wex sprinkled in there, a little bit of Blight Resist. I have a level 2 Deco slot to slot an Evade Extender, and I have some innate Part Breaker. And all in all, it's just a very comfy set, and it's going to have a lot of healing coming in, especially Flayer coupled with Recovery up. I'm going to pop wounds, and it's going to be like a Mega Potion coming off. And I found that to just be very, very comfortable. And to be honest, there's not a whole lot that we need out of armors. You could go for Balahara and some of the Ray Dow pieces. Of course, these are going to have some points of Evade Extender, but we could just as easily slot that in. It's going to be a level 2 decoration. And so because of that, when it comes to building a lance or building a set for Gunlance in the late game, there's not a whole lot that you really need to worry about because, as I mentioned, our shelling strength isn't going to go up how it would with a lot of weapons. So, going for something like, going for, well, Adrenaline Rush doesn't really matter for Gunlance, but, like stuff like Peak Performance, stuff like Counter-Strike, stuff like Adrenaline Rush and Agitator. Yes, it is going to help the overall damage of our lance because it's going to help our slaps. But, I mean, we're going with this 5-piece here and we're popping off level 5 Flayer and level 5 Burst. And that's already going to be a ton of damage and we have a ton of comfort at the same time. So this is the recommended set I would suggest for endgame Gunlancing. So to dive into that set in particular, this set is identical across all 3 of my Gunlances, but in the helm, we're going to want a Flayer deco and a protection jewel. In the chest, we're going to need a chain deco. The gloves, you can go with whatever. I went for 3 medicine, but you could go for things like shockproof and more utility. In the pants, I dropped a single jumping into that level 2 slot, another protection, and then another chain jewel and another protection. And of course, we have the chain charm. And this is going to give us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in terms of getting all of our points together for burst. And then in terms of Flayer, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on Flayer as well. And all in all, this is just an incredibly comfortable set for Gunlance. I never really feel like I'm at risk. As long as I'm popping wounds, I'm topping off my health. And it's just a really, I feel like this impenetrable tank that's just blowing stuff up. It's very comfy. Now, talking about the decos in particular for the weapons, for the Fire Trail or Keldor, this is going to come with guard built in. So we're going to be slotting in Art 3, Magazine 2, and then I like to go for a shield up just to give me the capability for blocking anything that would potentially come in. And that's going to be basically the same loadout for most. If I'm going for the Jin Dahad, it comes with guard, so I'm going to put guard up. If I'm going for the White Cannon comes with guard up, so I could go guard, or I could go offensive guard. It's really going to be preference. But once again, you would go Art 3 Magazine. Now, this is going to change very slightly with the Lawful Boars because we then get access to 331. So for here, we're still going to go for Artillery 3. I managed to score a Magazine Iron Wall, which is fantastic since this has guard 2. That's going to put me straight up to guard 3. And then for the last one, I went for a Shield Jewel. But once again, if you don't feel guard up is necessary, you could certainly just slot in offensive guard. And to be fair, there's not a whole lot in terms of unguardable attacks that I've encountered so far. So you could probably get by without guard up, but it's one of those, like, I'd rather just have it. I'd rather just be able to block the entire world type deals. But other than that, that is going to cover the Gunlance. Gunlance is a lot of fun to play here. I was actually a little bit worried going into this because I kind of got used to my rocket chase that I had back in Sunbreak, but this is by far, I think, the best iteration of Gunlance we've ever had. It feels impactful, it feels beefy, and it feels like it's capable of pumping out some really mean damage. Shooting things out of the air with Wyvern Fire is just spectacular. It's an actual just sight to behold. It's one of my favorite things to do. But either way, let's jump in. We'll do a hunt with this. I'm likely going to Widelance. That's what has drawn me in, Wide Boys for life. But either way, let's jump into a hunt and show it on off. And it turns out we're not actually going to go anywhere again because I got a Tempered Rathian that's up, and that is the perfect target to go after with the Gunlance. We can show off what I was just talking about with blasting something out of the sky, which is really fun. My Gunlance has a little bit of dragon in it. He's weak to dragon. This poor thing is going to get turned into a coat. Now, when it comes to Gunlance and hunts, if we were to jump off and do our dismounting attack, it's going to do a wide sweep in the air, like a full burst. It's a lot of damage, but it's not very good at mounting. We can also jump off and hit right trigger, but if you're looking for a mount, you're going to want to jump and just go for triangle or Y or whatever your controller is. You just want to hit that attack. That's going to be a lot better for getting a mount on the target, because as you'll see here, I already got the mount just hitting that twice. You probably noticed I did this with IG a lot, but compared to the beta, I noticed that most monsters, if I try to go for a third wound while mounted, they'll tend to just get knocked down. Like, they won't shake me off, they'll just get straight knocked down, and I won't get my finisher. So now, as a general rule of thumb, I'm going for 2, and that's it. Trying to get that head. Give me the head, Wrath. Want that head so bad. I should have just wyvern fired it. He's like just barely at a spot where I'm missing it. I'll get him right here as it comes down. You notice I'm pushing into him as I do that. I'm trying to get as close as possible. Right there, I could have gone for another one, but I was too far back. So instead, I went for the perfect block and the fast cast on that. And then I whiffed my block.
Leave this to me.
Alright, hang on. I need to, stop running so much. Right now, even though there's a wound, I'm trying to get that charged up. Big damage. Worth. Probably too far, but let's let it rip anyway. Oh, he ran into it. Oh, you big idiot.
Looks like it's moving to a new area.
No, it's not. It's not going anywhere. Ooh, I need to get that wound. Oh, and there it is. The final Wyvern Fire, taking him on down. Thought he was going to fly away. This is why you got to have the flash pods up. For those that don't know about that, anything in your slinger that's equipped, even if your weapon is out and it's something that's a little more cumbersome when it's out, like the Gunlance, that's probably a bad way to describe it. But while you are in focus mode, clicking the left stick on your weapon will fire that out. So really nice way to make sure that your Rathians aren't getting away when you're hunting them. Takes them out before they have a chance to take off. But overall, not too shabby, not too bad. 6 minutes on a tempered Wrath, I will take it. But either way, that is going to wrap things up for Gunlance. I mean, I could do a full hunt with normal and a full hunt with long, but to be honest, it's just, you know, it's a different flavor of ice cream. All the Gunlances are really fun. I don't know. There's something simple about just burst shelling and then doing Wyvern Fire over and over. It's very much like the Unga Bunga of Gunlance, and I just love it. So either way, wrapping things up here. Up next will likely be Charge Blade, because I've been playing a lot of that. Either that or Switch Axe, we'll see. Either way, thanks for coming on by, and I'll catch you next time.